Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time for the first Devblog of the season for the next major updates, and it should be no surprise to anybody that this Devblog is about the FOX-3 missiles. Obviously, in War Thunder, these have been talked about for ages, an absolutely ridiculous amount of time, and it has been known that they've been coming for at least a few months now. On the last dev server, they tested them. I had a go at them. They were alright, but at the same time, it wasn't a great testing area. But then again, how do you test these things in a proper area? I suppose you just chuck them at the live server. Yeah, now FOX-3s are going to be gracing us in the next major updates. The only real question is, how will they grace us? Will we get new vehicles with access to them, or will they add them to pre-existing vehicles? I think personally the way that they're going to do it is they'll add a few new vehicles here and there, just to get people hyped about the top tier stuff, but a lot of pre-existing vehicles will get access to the missiles too, since they should have those capabilities in real life. So what is a FOX-3 missile? It is an active radar homing missile, and the best way to describe it is it's very similar to a semi-active radar homing missile, which we have in the game, apart from you do not have to maintain lock on the target. So the way that a semi-active radar homing missile works, at least in War Thunder, is you lock onto a target with your radar. You fire the missile, and then your machine or your plane kind of communicates with the missile to keep it on the target of what you have locked. So there is a necessity to be able to keep whatever plane you're trying to hit locked if you're firing a semi-active radar homing missile. Stuff like AIM-7s, for example, and even stuff like the R3R is another example of it. So with a semi-active, you have to continuously have radar lock. With an active radar guided missile, the apparatus to actually guide the missile onto the target and also maintain lock is in the missile itself. So you need, I believe, a lock to start with in order to fire the missile, but once that's happened, the missile will guide itself, meaning that it's a basically fire and forget missile. You will not have to worry about maintaining the lock because the active radar homing seeker will do it for you. Now, one of the things is these things have specific ranges, so you might have to hold lock just until it sees the target. This is something that we actually see in game already with the active radar homing missiles we have, the Phoenixes that are on the F-14. So if you want to kind of see how the mechanics of FOX-3s are going to work, you can basically just look at the Phoenixes because they're already there. The FOX-3 idea, though, is quite funny, though, because you technically have three Foxes. You have FOX-1, which is, firing a semi-active radar homing missile. FOX-2, which is the infrared homing missiles, stuff like the AIM-9s, for example, or the R-73 or the R-60. And then the FOX-3 is the active radar homing missile. But funnily enough, FOX-3 didn't always mean active radar homing missile. It actually also meant guns or cannons. So that's really odd to me. I wonder why they just didn't add like a FOX-4 and just put it as active radar. I suppose the idea was because cannons didn't require its own one, but I feel like they probably just changed it up. So yeah, that's a little bit of history, which is always fun to me. But according to Gaijin, the active radar homing seekers, the missiles which are coming in, we're going to have the French Mika, or the MICA, the Chinese PL-12, the American AIM-120, the Russian R-77, the Japanese AAM-4, the Israeli Derby, and also the South African R-Data. And I'm pretty sure that these are all the ones which we already had in the game. Well, I shouldn't say in the game, but on the dev server. I can't remember seeing the AM4 for Japan, but I do remember seeing all of the other ones that's around the place. It also says these models are characterized by excellent maneuverability and high thrust. The dimensions of FOX-3 missiles allow for a large load to be carried, even on lighter fighters. The aircraft that will carry these weapons will be amongst the top fighters for all nations in the game, with the best aircraft in the game now having new tactical capabilities. So this obviously indicates that some of the vehicles that are already there in the game are going to get these abilities. So sometimes in War Thunder, when you get like new vehicles, sometimes they like to sell obviously new mechanics on top of them to try and get people to play them, but it doesn't seem like that's the case here. Seems like they're actually taking a lot of pre-existing vehicles and giving them access to these platforms. So the question then is, since you're going to have a even larger gap between the haves and the have-nots in terms of the top tier bracket, are we going to see some more BRD compression again, especially now that you don't technically have to keep these vehicles, especially in a realistic, at 12.7, because because of the difference between ground realistic BRs and air realistic BRs. If you haven't noticed, a lot of aviation is stuck at 12.7 because ground is stuck at 11.7, meaning that if you had actually a higher BR aircraft, it really actually wouldn't work in terms of matchmaking. But now that isn't the case, because you can just have a ground realistic setup, and then you can have an air realistic setup, so it doesn't really matter too much. They also go through how these things are going to work in the game, which is quite fun. So with an understanding of this shortcoming at the end of the 1980s, Advanced Aviation Powers began to develop a new generation of medium-range aircraft missiles. These were distinguished by the presence of an active radar seeker that didn't require target tracking throughout the missile's flight. Good aerodynamics and the use of an energetically optimal trajectory with a climb and further exchange of potential energy for kinetic energy ensures a high launch range for active radar homing missiles. Unlike missiles with semi-active radar guidance, they operate autonomously and don't require a constant illumination of the target by the pilot or the radar for the carrier aircraft. However, when launching from longer ranges, it's most optimal to track a target in TWS mode to provide radio correction. A common property of these types of missiles is a combined control method. The active radar homing of the missile is capable of capturing a fighter-type target at a distance of 15 to 20 kilometers, which allows the missile to be used at close range in a fire-and-forget format. When flying over a long distance before approaching the target at the captured distance, the missile is guided using an inertial navigation system, which can receive correction commands from the carrier. It clarifies the coordinates and speed of the target in the inertial guidance system, which is necessary to launch the missile at a maneuvering target. The missile's autonomy in the final part of its trajectory allows it to simultaneously fire at several targets, including in the fire-and-forget mode. But for effective use, it's better to keep targets in the track while scan mode for as long as possible. People have asked me how I believe this will change the meta of how people play. I don't honestly think it's going to change it too much, apart from people are just going to be firing these willy-nilly at people, which is what they already do with IR missiles. So with semi-actives, you actually need to get the lock, and then you need to, get the fire on. With these, it's going to be a bit more just toss everything and then go gun mode and go missile mode close up. I think what will happen is at the start of the game, just like what happens with the F-14s, people will just lock onto anything and just fire the missiles and just see where they end up. And then after that, you'll just go into the furball, bee's nest, whatever you want to call it, and people use their IR stuff, stay low to the ground so they don't get hit by the semis or the active radar homing missiles, and then you will be fine. If you stay close to the ground, as long as the mechanics don't change, that's the easiest way of dodging these things. And hopefully that stays around and they don't decide to change it. Because if they do, there won't really be a great counter to these things, and it'll just mean whoever fires first wins, which isn't very fun. As always though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Gixie, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.